Well, welcome to Public Policy Show. We're live from Harvard Business School, and today we have two guests. We have Kim Yosir from Thrive Organization, and we have Senator Kennedy. First of all, we're gonna address a tragic moment, passing of Senator Kennedy, and our condolences go to the Kennedy family. And now, moving on, we're gonna talk about Thrive Organization. And please tell us, how did you get into this organization, and what do you do there?
Yeah, great. So my name is Kim Yasir again, and I'm the co-founder and chief empowerment officer of Thrive Communities. At Thrive, we support adults returning after incarceration, and we connect people to networks of support within the community. So we're really asking the question, what is the role of community in reentry, and how do we give people in our communities more agency to welcome people back and build wholeness together?
Okay. And what are your upcoming projects?
Yeah, so our approach, we have kind of three primary things that we look at. We look at community building, restorative reentry, and leadership development. So community building, we have a couple of trainings that we invite community members to come to that focus on the experiences of people returning from incarceration, the experiences of survivors and victims of violent crimes, as well as looking at restorative justice and at experiences of oppression. And so all of those go into training a community member to become a stronger ally through reentry, or for community members who are deeply impacted by incarceration, increasing the support that surrounds them as well. The second piece is restorative reentry. So we'll match a returning citizen with 3 community volunteers, and that team meets on a weekly basis during the transition back home. And that's called a circle of support and accountability. So we're planning to launch 4 to 6 of those in the next before December. And then the third part is leadership development. We have a fellowship and internship program for people who have experienced incarceration and kind of want to dip their toe into the nonprofit world, see what that experience is like, see if it's an area that they want to explore more deeply at a professional level.
And how can somebody apply for this internship?
Oh, the internship? Reach out to us. Our website is thrivema.org. Yeah, if that's something that people are interested in, if they've experienced incarceration themselves and want to give that a chance, yeah, I'd love to hear from them.
And is there any age restriction?
So we serve adults 25 and older. So for our returning citizens, they're 25 and up. For our volunteers, we do accept people who are, as long as people are adults, so 18 and over, who want to volunteer within our circles. And the fellowship is open to anyone who's been in the community for at least a year.
Oh, wow, very impressive. And Senator Kennedy, you worked on community development and small business committee. Could you share your experience working on the Small Business Committee with us?
Sure. I'm the vice chairman of that committee, which is a joint committee between the Senate and the House, and we've got legislation that we're holding hearings on. We've had some hearings so far. There's been a couple of interesting pieces of legislation that we're looking at. One is to do a study on small newspapers in smaller communities, and what could be done to maybe restore them or make sure that they survive.
Right.
I think that for a lot of communities, a lot of cities in Massachusetts, if they didn't have a daily newspaper, then it wouldn't be a good thing. All hell could break loose. So it's always good to have somebody, a watchdog, and usually the daily newspaper serves that effect. But most of my background is in municipal government. In Lowell, I'm from Lowell, and while I was in municipal government, I've been very interested in central business districts and trying to bring them back and bring retail back to those central business districts in Lowell. But I think the same thing could apply for each of the 40 cities in the Commonwealth.
And it's important that you mentioned helping small businesses and new firms to enter the market. I'm doing research that shows that back in 1955, number of new firms that was entering the economy was over 120,000. The next, 1968, over 223,000 businesses were created that year alone. Fast forward 2014, number of businesses created less than 13,000.
Mm.
So, what are some of the policy tools that policy makers can use on the local and federal level?
Well, let me speak about retail locally, if I could. I think that since the Federal Highway Act of 1956, when the interstates were first started to be created, what you had was a serious drop off of retail in most of the central business districts throughout the Commonwealth. I think it's safe to say that outside of Boston, that probably happened in every other city in the Commonwealth, and they've struggled since that time. And a lot of them who had maybe anchor stores. I know Lowell used to have a Jordan Marsh for a while, and had 2 or 3 anchor stores really in the 60s and early 70s, but they're all gone now. So I think that for most of central business districts in most cities, what they really need to focus on is boutique retail, smaller retail shops that specialize in different types of retail. I think that's critical, and I think that's the way to go in the future. But I also think this. I think that in order to compete with shopping malls, they need to act like shopping malls. And by that I mean that in Lowell, for instance, Lowell also has downtown. There's a very large residential population now, which they didn't have 20 years ago. But a lot of buildings have been converted over to residential, and so you'll have retail on the first floor, storefronts on the first floor, but retail above. And there are probably more than 5,000 people living downtown in downtown Lowell right now. But the stores open at 9 o'clock in the morning and they close at 5. And people that live downtown go to work at 9 o'clock in the morning and they come home at 5. So they're not able to take advantage of those stores. Those stores should think about opening up maybe in the evening a couple of times, or at times when the people that live there, and part of the reason why you choose to live in a central business district is so that you can avail yourself of those services and that they'll be close. So they should give some thought to opening up evenings or just have extra hours so that those people can shop at those stores. And I really think that they would. Another thing that they do at the mall that makes malls work is all the stores at a mall open up at the same time, and they close at the same time. And if you open up late, or if you don't open up at all, you get a letter, and then the second time you get a penalty. So, but that way, when you go to the mall that every store is going to be open. It isn't like that in central business districts, and they would be better off if they did that. I think that's something that's really important for them to do. A third thing, and this is something that's been kicked around for a few years in municipal government, is something called the Business Improvement District, where properties in the central business district would pay an extra amount of real estate tax, and that money would be pulled together and then spent on enhancements that would make the central business district be more attractive to shoppers coming in. So that you may have on a Saturday, you may want to choose that money to clean everybody's storefront windows. You may want to use it to buy flower boxes and maintain the flower boxes. You may want to use it for sidewalk entertainment.
Right.
There's a whole menagerie of ideas that you could use that for. But I really think that central business districts in most of the cities should think about going in that direction, and I think they'd be much better off.
And one of the central tenets of a capitalist society that we live in is capital and financing of these small businesses. But we've seen the decline of small banks around the country. And one of the reasons that happened was the Interstate Banking Act that allowed a lot of the banks to go into different states and merge with smaller banks. And subsequently, that resulted in decline in small business loans. And I was just telling you before the show that
Yes.
I used to work for Bank of America, and we used to loan to small businesses that they were called small businesses. At the time, you had to be making over $1 million for you to get a small business loan. So that eliminated whole sector of small businesses that could have been financed by local banks or community banks. So, what are some of the policy tools that we can reinstate? Is there any way we can reinstate the Interstate Banking Act so that the mergers between banks are restricted?
I think that we could, I don't think we have anything that's pending right now, but certainly we could look at doing something like that that would make money be more available to small businesses.
Right.
One of the things that the committee is doing now is traveling around to different areas to get input from small businesses to see what their needs
Right.
are. And it was maybe about a month and a half ago, we met in Haverhill and went around to several businesses in Haverhill, and then and we had a hearing there. And in September, we'll be doing the same thing in the Lowell area, but it will be, instead of a hearing, we will go around to several businesses and then have a roundtable discussion with small businesses to see what their needs are, and then probably act on that. One of the interesting things, and this is just a piece of trivia, but in Haverhill, one of the companies that we visited was a piano manufacturer.
Oh.
And I was surprised to learn that there's only 3 piano manufacturers left in the United States of America.
Oh my God.
Only 3. Isn't that surprising?
Oh my. I love playing piano.
Yeah.
But I'd rather play on a locally made piano than on an international brand. But the banking is so critical because since 1980s, and that mainly happened because of massive deregulations that took place, capital is not available to a lot of the small businesses, and small business administration is taking some of the responsibility. But if you look at it from a distance and look at the overall picture, we have a capitalist society where government is providing loans, which makes very little sense, where we used to have banks that used to provide these loans. And the banking main duties are to take deposits and then loan out to small businesses. Those are the 2 main responsibilities. But after the mergers with large banks, what happened was the deposits were shifted to trading. So large banks are mainly interested in trading because it's too expensive for them to invest or loan out to small businesses because they're just not specialized in local markets. So, and it is critical to develop these small businesses. When you were talking about leadership development, do you have any programs that teaches like program participants how to create a business or how to engage in innovative activities?
So that's a great question. So we don't have it directly as an organization, but we are located inside, like our office is in a co-working space. It's called Entrepreneurship for All. It's how Thrive got its start. It's an incubator. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it yet, but if you're not, okay.
I'm
good.
sure I will be soon.
Yes, I would love to connect you because
Okay.
this conversation you're talking about would be great there. But we actually have one of our returning citizens who's come home is actually going through the accelerator now because we introduced him to that space.
Right.
And so he applied for the accelerator and is getting ready to start his own food business.
Oh, wow.
So while we're not doing it directly, we're building the connections in the community to help empower people who do have business ideas to get off the ground.
Yeah, and that is so critical. And then, a lot of people think about small businesses as food industry businesses or service industries.
Mm-hmm.
But as Sandra mentioned, like piano manufacturer or anything else, a small architectural company, the actual businesses that are employing people in different sectors is so critical for the growth of the economy. And for that to happen in some of the central business districts, it's just really challenging just to think how can we encourage smaller businesses to take some of the prime retail locations as opposed to large multinational corporations that currently occupy most prime real estate, right?
We have in Lowell a good amount of startup companies, mostly that have come out of the University of Lowell, and that have chosen to start and grow their business in the city. And there's been, space that's been made available for them, and some of those are thriving and doing very well. But I think that at some point it would be great if you could come up and and speak at maybe one of the roundtables. That would be, you know, maybe
Absolutely.
you would like to do that, and we would love to have you. All the input we could get is good. So if you could do
I'd
that
love to,
sometime, okay.
I'd
Good.
love to. Because at the end of the day, it's giving people purpose. You know, in small businesses, people have more purpose to, you know, they have goals, they can make impact, and working for larger entities usually is not associated with the same type of motivation.
Mm-hmm.
Even though the people that are working at large entities, they're great. It's not the people at the end of the day. It's the structure of the economy that needs to be adjusted to the modern era. So let me go back to our slideshow. Now, what are some of the upcoming projects that you'll be working on at the Small Business Committee?
Well, we've got we've only had one hearing so far, so we'll be having additional hearings. There's not a lot of legislation that was filed, but you know, looking at the newspapers is one that you know, that would be a study that we would do, looking at ways to create or to enhance business opportunities for small businesses in different areas would be a second piece of legislation. But there isn't a lot, and I think that's kind of one of the reasons why we're having the roundtables is to try to see if there are ideas out there that we should be using to try to create legislation on our own that wasn't filed by any member, but that would still, you know, that the committee could use to push on its own.
Right. And some of the committee hearings, I know some states record them, like Iowa, Alaska, Texas. They have like outstanding like video files, so you just go online and you see the actual hearings, of committee hearings. Is there any way we could do the same in Massachusetts?
I think that we do that. I think that they're you know, they're all videotaped, so they're available. So I would imagine that they're archived. To be honest with you, I don't know where they're archived, but I think that they would be available. And you know, for instance, the hearing that we held in Haverhill was taped by the local television station.
Okay.
So that one would be available. And I'm sure that the roundtable that we'll be doing in September in Lowell will also be on cable TV as well. So and archived because of that. And I think going forward, you know, through the end of this year and next year, we'll be doing that in other areas as well. So.
Oh, that's excellent. We can get access to those hearings because we can analyze them and see.
Right.
Well, thank you very much, both of you, for joining us today. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week.